Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Arun Gupta. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Open Ecosystem at Intel. You can find all about us at open.intel.com. We also have a podcast at open.intel.com/podcast. We would love to feature you as a guest over there. Today is a special Friday. Docker is a phenomena that changed the world, and now Solomon, who's here, who created Docker, what about 16 years ago, is to talk about how is he changing the world all over again. Solomon, welcome to the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We were talking about it. The world cannot thank you enough for how you gave Docker to the world. And I was listening to your story at KubeCon Paris last week, how it was literally born at a walking distance from the convention center. So before we dig into Dagger, I want this to be all about Dagger, but give us that story about how Docker came about to be and how life has changed for you in the last 16 years.
Yeah, well, I grew up in France, went to engineering school in France, and like I was saying in that talk, I got, around 2008, about 15, 16 years ago, I got really excited about this new thing called infrastructure in cloud, right? This concept that you could run applications on a lot of servers out there instead of one server at a time. And there wasn't any good tooling to do that really. And I was playing with this nascent technology on Linux, which was the ability to virtualize the Linux kernel, and then just experimenting with ways to use that as a new kind of an application deployment tool. And we were nobodies, right? No one cared what we were doing, and it took many years, several years, to get anyone to care. But it was very fun, and eventually we made it to Silicon Valley, got our chance to get people to pay attention there, and that sort of led to launching Docker in 2013, and then things got a little crazy. People went from not caring at all to caring maybe almost too much.
Yeah,
And
it was quite
yeah.
passionate, engagement. And as a Docker captain, I'm really proud in terms of what we accomplished in the early years and how it completely changed. How do you do it works on my machine, truly make it works on my machine kind of a concept. So
Yeah.
super awesome. Thank you. Once again, thank you very much for what you gave to the world. Let's talk about Dagger. What is Dagger?
So Dagger is sort of it's my new startup, Dagger.io, and we've started it with Sam Alba and Andrea Lizzardi, who are two of the earliest employees at Docker, right? So we brought the band back together, so to speak, and we're solving a problem that we intended to solve with Docker, but never got around to it. So it's sort of the continuation, and we're focusing on the CI/CD pipelines, specifically how messy they are. So Dagger takes all these scripts and complicated monolithic pipelines and helps you turn them into um, clean code. Basically, it lets you break down the scripts into nicely reusable functions that run in containers, of course, and then you get to compose those functions dynamically into pipelines. And so it's a way to simplify the existing mess. And in the process, you just get a lot of benefits. You can move faster, things are more reliable. Turns out it's more efficient too, so you spend less on compute. You get a lot of benefits downstream from that. But yeah, we take something that should be code and we make it actually code. That's basically what Dagger does.
Very nice. Now, today when people think about CI, CD, things like Jenkins or GitHub Actions or
Hmm.
GitLab, CI is what comes to their mind. What is lacking in those tools we're trying to create with this?
Yeah. Well, those platforms are definitely part of the CI, but the reality on the ground is, for an actual software project CI, there are dozens and dozens of tools and scripts involved. So it's never just GitHub Actions or just Jenkins. It's GitHub Actions plus a lot of shell scripts, plus a bunch of Docker files, and this one tool that someone wrote 3 years ago in this weird language. but then they left, so no one knows how it works. But you can't touch it because if you touch it, deploys break. And
Right.
then someone brought Helm, and some of it runs in Kubernetes, some of it doesn't. And then you just have this Frankenstein monster that just sort of keeps growing and growing in complexity as the project grows, as your team grows. And that's really the competition for Dagger. It's the overall homegrown mess. It's not really Jenkins or GitHub Actions. Sometimes a team wants to move off of a particular tool or platform, and sometimes they want to keep it and use it better. Either way, Dagger can help sort of um, actually implement change without breaking everything.
That's wonderful. So it's basically, as you said, GitHub Actions, Jenkins are part of the solution, but they are not the solution. How it can compose everything together, and I think what you were talking
Right.
about is a reusable components. So you can
Yeah.
truly build on this. These are composable components, essentially.
Right. That's really the problem. That's the reason the mess is still there. It's not like people. It's not like software teams want their pipelines to be a mess of, scripts mashed together. It's just that the alternative, which is a clean modular system where you can look at all the components of your pipelines, like you look at a Lego construction. Like there's a straightforward system, and you can understand what's going on. That requires a platform that's capable of expressing everything in your pipelines as Lego bricks. So you need a platform that's modular enough to actually do that, and that's just really hard to do in practice. You know, so the alternatives to glue stuff together. So our breakthrough, I think, is we found a way to actually give you a Lego system that works. That you can actually encapsulate pretty much anything that's going on in your pipeline, whether it's a build, a test, a deployment, that weird one-off task, and actually encapsulate it in an actually reusable component, right? And then you can actually compose those together. And really, that's the key, right? That's what made Lego, the actual Lego,
Yeah,
also successful. The individual
yeah.
brick is actually very hard to design and engineer correctly, and they figured it out. And then from there, this whole ecosystem appeared, right?
Yeah, so instead of using chewing gum and duct tape to get your CI system up and running, you're truly providing a framework and those
Right,
composable components that you can plug in and out
right.
based upon your need. So the way we were talking about this 3-year-old script, the developer has left, it's messy, but now it's packaged up as a container, and all you care about is the API coming out of it. You swap it out, put it with a more performant implementation, and voila, you can keep going.
That's right. And I mean, the way I describe it, the theory of it, does not sound very unique because there are plenty of platforms out there that will tell you they do that. Oh, we have a modular plugin system, whatever. Really the key is in practice, how much can you actually encapsulate in this platform's modular system, and how much is left afterwards that doesn't fit, and you have to basically move into glue scripts, right?
Yeah, yeah, awesome. All right, well, a couple of quick comments here. You probably heard this before as well. You are being called a goat, and in a great sense. I love that element. And hey, Scott, hello from Germany. So people are joining in
Hello.
from the world. That's fantastic. Yeah, please keep commenting here. So, Salman, we wanted to kind of run through your website because I think your website, Dagger.io, really explains the whole concept really well. Walk us through
Hmm.
that, and
Sure.
then we'll dig into, because code is king in an open source world. So I would love to hear it. Let's see some live stuff over there. So let's get into it.
Totally. Okay, I'm looking at my website now. Um, so you got some nice diagrams and some explanations, but this, the summary really is this. You got messy CI scripts. You can turn them into clean code, and the secret really is this building block that we call Dagger functions. And the trick with Dagger functions is that they run in containers, so they're portable. They run anywhere, and they're encapsulated in an API that you define in actual code. So it's sort of the best of regular code and a container.
So you
And
define the function
yeah,
in language of your choice,
exactly.
and then
So
it
yeah,
gets packaged up in a container exposing that API that the others can use. And that's what brings the portability element of it.
exactly. Yeah, you pick a language. At the moment there are three SDKs that support functions. Go, Python, TypeScript, and we have a whole community that's in the process of contributing new SDKs. We've got Rust, Java, .NET, PHP, Elixir, sort of happening in process. And so you pick the SDK of your choice, you pick something, a task, a unit of your pipeline you want to daggerize, like the perfect Node.js build or your deployment to Fly.io or a Kubernetes integration, anything. And then you express that logic in code. And the code usually is very small because you have access to an API, the Dagger API, with very powerful primitives. Anything you need to run containers, you can manage, artifacts, secrets, things like that. And so you're basically orchestrating these primitives and assembling them into a new primitive. So a typical Dagger function would be maybe 10 lines, 30 lines of code, maybe 50 if it's really advanced logic. But that's really the key. Those functions are small, they're quick to put together. Like we could definitely write one now, together from scratch,
Yeah,
no
yeah. Well,
problem.
that'd be awesome,
Yeah.
actually. So you write a function, and I want to emphasize the word daggerize. You daggerize it by
Yeah.
basically puts
Hmm.
into a container that gives you a building block, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah, and then what you do is you package these functions together in what we call a module, which is basically just a directory of source code. And then you can publish these modules to what we call the Daggerverse, and that's my favorite part of the website. This is the Daggerverse. We don't actually host these modules. We just index them. So it's similar to Go modules if you're familiar with that. Your modules are anywhere on Git, GitHub, etc. And then here I can come to search for them, and you can see there's a lot of these modules. There's actually more and more. So we launched this last week, and already there's several hundred modules.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is two things. First, it's very easy to put together a module that's useful because these functions are small. So you have this sort of instant gratification. Um, and also we've been developing this feature in the open for a while. And so our community, we're very community centric. We have a Discord server where everyone's hanging out and showing each other cool projects and talking about the joys of DevOps, and the horrors of DevOps. And this whole time we've been developing modules together. So on the day we launched this Daggerverse, which is, yeah, I think it's last week or the week before, um, it already had all this cool content.
That's
So I
awesome,
can,
actually.
if you want, I can walk you through like how this would work in practice.
No, absolutely. We want to see, let's take a simple example and walk us through that entire life cycle. Like now, I want to put a CI setup
Right.
around it. What would it take to write a function,
Right.
create a module, publish it to a
Yeah.
Daggerverse, and then how others could use it. So the
Hmm.
publishing side, the consuming side, let's see that whole life
Yeah.
cycle. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Sounds good. So typically the way a team will start adopting Dagger is in a very incremental way. So it's very rare that when you say, okay, let's just move everything over to Dagger. The whole point of Dagger is it's very easy to embed in an existing project in a way that's not disruptive at all. And typically, what happens is your CI is mostly fine. If you were starting today, maybe you would use Dagger for everything, but you're not. You have this existing project and your team's busy, and so it's very rare that you're just going to rush to move everything over. It does happen. Sometimes you have these big migration projects, and Dagger is very relevant for those. But typically, what happens is there's one area in your CI at any given time that's just a pain. Let's say 10%. It's super slow, or there's some change that needs to be implemented, and the change is painful. Um, it fails a lot. It's unreliable. Things like that. Um, Another very common problem is push and pray. Sometimes it's just really painful to have to commit, push, wait, just to know if your pipeline does what it's supposed to do, right? So you end up with a development loop for the pipeline itself in minutes instead of seconds like we're used to when we're developing a regular app, right? So so then you focus on that area and you start looking for functions, right? Ideally, the function that you're looking for already exists, so you don't have to write any new code. So I'll take one example. Okay, I've been spending some time with my friends over at ChainGuard. You're familiar
Very
with that
well.
team,
Yeah,
So
Dan
they have
Lawrence and all those guys. Yeah, very well.
yeah, so they have a lot of interesting tools that they're building, and they have this cool Linux distro called Wolfie. And so let's say the scenario is, okay, we have this, we want to try this new tool, right? And to add to our stack. Um, and that's a very time consuming process usually, oh, we got to make a change. Oh, great. I have to go mess with the pipelines again. And so here, that process can become much less painful. So here I would come to Dagger and say, okay, let's see if there's a
Okay.
Wolfie
All right.
module. And I see two matches. I'm picking one that I'm very familiar with because I wrote it. But so this is the page for the module. It says Wolfie is a container native Linux distribution with an emphasis on security. Awesome. By the way, check it out.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll
and
figure
it
out there.
shows how to install it. And then it shows what looks like an API documentation, right? Oh, there's a type called Wolfie. It represents a Wolfie Linux configuration. And then it has a function called container, which builds a Wolfie container. And I can see the return type. Okay, returns a container. And I can see here as argument, I can pass a list of strings, which is a list of packages to install. And here I have examples on how to call that function from the shell, from the command line, or from Go, Python, TypeScript. So this part is super important. Any function, available in any module anywhere in the Daggerverse, I can call directly from the command line. Almost, it's as if it were a specialized command line utility.
It's just a
And
CLI. Yeah, it's just a CLI.
right, the Dagger CLI.
Yeah.
And then later, if I want to develop my own function, as I'm writing code for my function in Go, Python, or TypeScript, I can call that function from my code regardless of the language. So right now, I don't know what language this particular module is written in, but it doesn't matter. So we have a full cross-language reusable component ecosystem, which is
Yeah,
key in
the
in
language
this
in which
world.
the function is written and the language in which it is used is
Mm-hmm.
completely decoupled in that sense.
Exactly.
And that
Yep.
gives you the flexibility that you can write in whatever you are comfortable with, but I will use it in the way I'm comfortable with.
Exactly. Yep. So then from here, the first part of the experience that's really fun is experimentation. Is really easy, and the loop for trying something and getting a result is um, very tight, very rapid. So here,
Yeah,
let's say I'll just open a terminal. Uh, the commands I'm going to type, they'll work the same on your computer. The only dependency is the Dagger CLI.
got it.
There's no pre-existing stuff I need to, prepare locally, which is
Does it
key, right?
require
That's what
like a
made.
Docker engine as a basic, like, if I'm a new developer
Yeah,
machine?
yeah, you're right. You do need a way to run containers because Dagger, again, it does what it does by running containers. So if you have Docker installed, it'll just automatically use that. And then there's some configurations you can have to use, whatever, Podman. You can run this in Kubernetes, which is a common scenario for production CI, right? So as long as your system can run containers, Dagger can run.
Okay.
So here I'm going to try this module, right? So there's this is notice this is the GitHub URL. So it's just source code. We can look at the source code after. So if I want to call a function, I'll just Dagger call -m for module. Okay, let's go check out this module. This is my Daggerverse repo, the repository with a bunch of my own modules, and one of them is Wolfie. At any time, I can call --help. So the Dagger CLI it'll automatically load this module, look at its API schema, and translate that into just regular command line, subcommands or flags. Again, so that with simply, basic familiarity with, shell scripting, I can start using these functions.
So just to kind of set the context, we are calling the Dagger module Wolfie, in which there is one function container. It could have
hmm
had multiple functions if we need to.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, and hold on. I think I'm having an. Of course, I have some sort of issue on my side.
That's all right.
Uh,
This is a real demo.
yeah, it is a real demo. Uh, okay. Do I have Docker running? Yes. What's my Dagger version? Oh, it's an. Okay. Should have. I think this is using a dev version of Dagger. So let me change my directory. Okay,
Okay.
this is the regular version. I think I was developing Dagger itself and screwed something up. So let me try again. Dagger call. Okay,
Bingo.
so so what happened here is the Dagger engine, it fetched this source code. It loaded the code for the module. What happens is on the fly, it builds a container to be the runtime of this function, and then it'll inspect what's possible and show it to me. And here you can see possible
So
flags, and
pause for a
here
second. Pause for a second.
container.
It downloads the module
Mm-hmm.
on the local Docker engine is where it builds a container on the runtime, and then it inspects it.
Yeah. So it doesn't actually use Docker. Docker is just a way to get it started. So um, the Dagger engine itself needs one container to start, and then from there, that container just runs more container as needed. You see what I
Gotcha.
mean?
Okay.
So
Understood.
it's its own container
Okay.
engine,
Okay.
completely
Okay. Got it.
self-contained. Yeah,
Got it.
you just need
Got
the
it.
Spark to get that first container going.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Is the meta container which is spinning up other
exactly.
containers.
Yeah, and all that's just abstracted away. It just kind of works out of the box.
Yeah. No.
Um,
As a developer, we want to understand what's happening under the hood. But
Of
this is
course,
pretty awesome.
yeah. Another thing that happens under the hood is Dagger relies heavily on build kit, which is an internal component used by Docker build. That's why it was built for.
Right.
And it turns out build kit can do much more than build a Docker file. It's a complete DAG engine. So any program that you can run as a DAG, in other words, a graph of um, parallel compute nodes that send data to each other, you can run on BuildKit. And it turns out CI pipelines, build pipelines are perfect for that.
Mm, mm.
One benefit we get out of that is the caching. So if you're familiar with Docker build, things get cached. You
Right.
run the same thing again, and it's really fast.
Right.
So Dagger uh, applies that to everything you run. So every time you run a function, that function runs more functions, it runs containers. All of that is cached automatically, which is why, for example, when I loaded, like I said, Dagger downloaded this module and built it on the fly as a container, it happened really quickly because it was already in my cache. Right?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So now I'm going to actually call this function called container, the one that was described here, right? And
That's right.
then
And to it, we can pass the APK packages to be installed
exactly
into
right.
the Wolfie image.
Exactly. So here I can add dash dash packages, and I'll say, give me git and OpenSSH, for example. And then, so that function call is going to return a container object, right? And so this is an important aspect of Dagger. You can chain functions dynamically. So a function can return an object. That object itself can have functions, right? And
Interesting.
then I can call that function, and I can keep chaining these functions. Very similar to how Docker files will just say, run this command, pull this container, then run this command, then copy this file. So all of that you can do on the fly from the command line.
So I'm
And
doing
yeah.
this on a command line. I think it'll
hmm
be fun to do it for the first time, on the command line. But maybe we'll dig later into this. How do we automate this? How do we like script this basically? Like the
Well,
chaining part.
right. Well, simply by typing the command, you're scripting it, and then of course the beauty of Bash is that it's the glue that holds the world together, right? So you can run this from your terminal as a developer, but you can just, if your team uses makefiles, then you just call this from your makefile. In CI, you'll simply copy paste the same command into that CI configuration, and that becomes your CI job. And so the calling Dagger functions from the command line becomes this the universal entry point into these functions, right?
So
And
the
then we'll
intention
see.
is to keep it as a CLI and then use this CLI to be injected wherever you need to be. I was thinking like in Docker, for example, you could write like a Docker file which would put all of those commands in place. There is no concept of a Dagger file here, so to say.
That's functions.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is I'll
Yeah.
show you. But what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this command line,
Okay.
do fun things, and then the command will grow longer and longer because we're having more and more fun. And then at some
Exactly.
point, you
Yeah.
say, "Hold on, because this is getting a little long,
Yeah.
and maybe I want to do some composition. I want to call one function and take the output and connect it to another function, and then it becomes a shell script that
Yeah.
it gets too
Yeah.
big, and then that's when you think, oh, I wish I had a special file, a DSL or something, and
Yeah.
then instead what you do is you write your own Dagger function, and you take that command that's getting a little long and you turn it into a 5 line 10-line
Got it.
function in Python or Go or TypeScript, and it translates one to one. Anything you can do from the command line here, you can do
Wonderful.
in code. And so
Got
I'll
it.
show you that because it's really quick and
Oh, so
easy.
that's the composable element of it. So
Yep.
you play around with CLI, you figure out that, oh, this is getting too long. Now Go, Python, TypeScript are natively supported. In addition, you talked about Rust, Java, .NET, PHP, Elixir are the
Right.
community contributed SDKs. So in
Yeah,
any of those languages, wherever you feel comfortable, you write your own function and then compose it and say, here's a new Lego block.
that's right. And
Got it.
and those other community SDKs, they're in the process of adding the ability to um, develop a function,
Got it.
but
Got it.
it's coming soon. Yeah.
Understood.
So,
Okay.
so for
Beautiful.
example, here I'm going to call this container function, and it's going to return a container object. Then I need to decide what to do with that container object. Right? If I just call
Wonderful.
this, it's going to work. You can see in live what's happening. It's calling I guess it's done. But it says container evaluated. And basically, I have a container object.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with it? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so, then I can list available functions for a container object. There are a lot because this is a core primitive, right? And so anything you could think of that you could do in a Docker file, you can do here, right? So you can chain execution of commands, with exec, you can mount files, you can copy files, etc. This is all in the API doc also. So I'll just call terminal, which is a function that we added, which simply runs an ephemeral instance of the container and gives you a terminal on it.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
yeah,
Okay.
so let me
So
just run
this
that
is the
again.
Docker entry point essentially into the container.
Right. Yep. And then by the way, you can also change the entry point. So you can say, oh,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
we have you can say, sorry, command, um, bash.
yeah. So now it's giving me a bash terminal in the Wolfie image.
Oh, it doesn't have bash. Anyway, you get the idea.
That's fine. No, I
Yeah,
got it. I got
exactly.
it. So
But to
I'm
note
getting
how
a terminal
I'm
in the
changing
Wolfie image
something,
with
huh?
Git and OpenSSH packages already pre-installed into that container.
Exactly. And then I can play around with it. Okay, Git is installed, SSH is installed. But see, let's say I want rsync now. Oh, rsync not installed. I exit. I exit my container. I change something in my pipeline. I run it again. You can see it installing. Do a little more work. Boom! Now rsync is installed. So this is an example of what makes the Dagger experience so fun. It's this rapid loop where you want to try something and you get the results very, very quickly, and then you just build from there. And the fun kind of compounds, right? For example, oh, I want this container, but I want it with a directory mounted in, right? So I can insert another function call in the chain, right, in my pipeline, and say with mounted directory, um, and you pass a path. If I'm not sure, I can just dash help. Oh, what are the arguments to this? And it's gonna say, where is it? Up here. A path and a source. Okay, what directory do you want to mount and where do you want to mount it? Makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, and so here, well, okay, that's a good question. What do I want to mount? Maybe the current directory, right? Let's see, where are we? oh yeah, maybe not my home directory, but maybe I want to mount uh, actually my Daggerverse repo, with all my
Yeah,
modules that I'm developing,
yeah.
and I'm going to mount it at SRC. By the way, let me do this. I like to do this to format my pipeline, just to
Yeah,
add some new lines in there.
yeah.
Uh, and then let me change. Oh, let me just open the terminal. So I just inserted another call, same container, but now mount something into it. So you can see it's copying. Oh, that's a
So
pretty
I
big
think,
directory.
as you said earlier, the Git, OpenSSH, rsync, those are all installed.
I mean,
So the thing
yeah,
is going to move fast. It's just the mounting part that is going to take time because it's very incremental and everything before that is already cached.
exactly. Yeah. So, and it's built kit. So the way it works is if you want to load local directories, it's not going to just randomly access them. It's going to take a snapshot of them, and
Got it.
then that snapshot will be added to the
Yeah,
DAG, and
copy over.
that's what allows
Yeah,
repeatable runs and
yeah,
caching,
yeah, yeah,
etc.
yeah,
So I think actually I happen to have picked a relatively large. What's in there? Wow.
yeah.
Uh, okay, it's done. Um, and you can see, aha, so it's in /src, right? And so let me change this so that I also change the work dir. So that I just lands nicely in the directory where everything's mounted. So this is not so different from iterating on a Docker file, except it's dynamic and it's much more flexible
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you're not
yeah,
just building something.
yeah. And
Okay,
what I'm
so
thinking about in terms
here
of
it is.
the life cycle is I'm going to experiment with the command on the CLI. And once I get
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with it, then I can say I'm going to package it up as a function and put it up in the Daggerverse.
Yeah, I mean you don't have to put in the Daggerverse, but if it's useful and reusable, I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah,
agree. Yeah, then why would you not, right? Of
yeah, yeah,
course, internally, we also have, large enterprises, et cetera, that will use this to encapsulate their private catalog of application delivery logic, their build logic, et cetera, and typically they would not publish it, on the on
Well,
the
I was
on,
coming to
on the
that actually.
open. Hmm?
So Daggerverse is all public. Is there an element by which I can do the Daggerverse in my company itself so that I can share components accordingly?
Right. So the module system itself is just Git. So you don't actually need Daggerverse to share modules. So Daggerverse is for discovering and selecting, right, and
Gotcha.
curation. So we got that request a lot actually to support a private version of the Daggerverse so that
I can
you
imagine.
get
Yeah,
the search engine. Yeah, so we're realizing now, oh, that will be really great. So we will ship that as a product, I think, and then you
yeah,
kind of get that catalog, across an organization,
yeah,
which is very valuable. But that doesn't exist yet. But you can totally just share modules, and you just need to know the URL of the module. Which Git repo has which module.
yeah,
Again, it's exactly like Go modules. So we took great care to not centralize the hosting, centralize the naming of these modules. Unlike the Docker ecosystem, when we launched Docker Hub,
yeah.
it was hosted by Docker and the
Right.
naming was controlled by Docker.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
there's a trade-off there. But here, what we want is we want to
Distribute.
remove any friction for adopting this platform. Basically, it should just be a no-brainer to use it, and you can see that across everything we do. Easy to adopt, easy to fit in an existing stack, easy to get started and do something small quickly,
Yeah.
and easy to host and distribute your modules any way you wish.
Yeah, it's very composable, very small components. You start with
Right.
it and then something grow big. I just want to bring one more comment. Hi,
Hmm.
Miranda. She's sharing the link to the Wolfie on
Oh,
Dagger.
of course.
Yeah,
Yeah. Actually, if you go to daggerverse.dev, it's also linked from our website, and you search for Wolfie, you'll find it pretty quickly.
beautiful.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to search for. But
It's awesome.
so to finish my demo, you know, I put together this little pipeline. I discovered this Wolfie module. I called its function to get a container with the packages I want, and then I mounted a local directory. But the fact that it's a local directory is just, um, a convenience. The Dagger has a primitive to represent any directories, and a directory could be loaded from a local path. It could be pulled from a Git repository. It could be downloaded from, an S3 bucket, um, or it could just be dynamically created by another Dagger function, right? So I can just plug the output of any function that returns a directory into another function that takes a directory as argument. So that's where the
Yeah.
composition really shines. We have these core types to represent artifacts. And so the CLI here will just give you a little bit of convenience for doing that. And then once you switch to code, then it becomes even more powerful because you can, plug in anything you want. So for
Yeah.
example, here, I can point to a Git repository. I could say, you know what, I want to mount the source code of Dagger, at the branch main. And I'm just telling the CLI to do that, and it will sort of on the fly run another function and plug the output of that function into my little function here. So I just rerun, and now I've got the source code of Dagger, right?
And you are in the work there because that SRC is mounted as the work there, so you are automatically seeing the entire source code here.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Um, so yeah, that's the building block. So let's say now this is getting a little too big, and I think, okay, this is my primitive. This is a really useful thing I want to do. So
Yeah.
like you said before, I don't want to just type this out every time.
Yeah.
It's great that I can because I can get started quickly. Again, the world does run on Bash script. And so it would start like this. You would replace a really long existing Bash script and a really long YAML with a very small Bash script called by a very small YAML file, right? You're shrinking your scripts. And then to shrink it even more, you say, okay, this can be an actual Dagger function now. So,
Right.
for
Right.
example, let's see where I am here. I'm going to just create my little module here. So I'll say Dagger init. Um, what should I call it? I'm going to call it Arun.
Um, this is what? This is
This is our little, we're going to develop our own little Dagger module that does
yeah.
this, but in code.
Okay.
For now, we're going to call it the Arun module.
Oh.
And now I'm going to say, so it creates a directory that has a file that says, I'm a Dagger module, simplest thing in the world. And then I'm going to develop functions for it. And I need to choose an SDK. So I'm going to choose Go because I'm more familiar with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my source. It's going to generate some source code for me to make my life easier. So I'm just going to drop it right here in the current directory. So now I have a bunch of extra files. And I have this main.go.
So it gives you the template code to get started with, and you can actually
Exactly.
start
Yeah.
putting in the real
Yeah.
business logic right away.
Exactly. So this is a fully functional Dagger module written in Go with 2 functions. And you can see, that, if you're familiar with Go, probably you can tell even if you're not, but they're actual Go functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a type here that represents the module to get you started, and that's it. So here I'm just going to remove this, and here we're going to say test Wolfie, or I don't know, my container,
Yeah.
and it's going to return a container, and returns a container with packages I need plus a mounted directory.
There you go.
Aha.
That's exactly what we did in the CLI.
And let's say I want to abstract this away. So instead of, I want to let the caller decide what directory to mount. So
What
I'm going
directory
to
to
take the
mount?
source
Yeah.
directory as an argument,
Yeah.
and have this type directory that I can
Yeah.
use. And then I want to do this, right? So let me just move
Correct.
this. Whoops. Let me just copy paste this into here so we can look at it.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not valid Go. I'm just,
That's fine.
let me put this in comments. Okay, so, the first thing we want to do is load the module. So we're not going to do this dynamically because I want type safety. I want my IDE to tell me what's possible, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do here is Dagger install that module. Dagger install Wolfie module from before. And so Dagger's going to go fetch the code, and then it's going to do something very cool. You can see here the dependency is added to that little Dagger JSON file, and everything's pinned to the specific Git commit, etc. So you have a nice clean dependency system. But more importantly, it just generated in the same way that when in the command line, the Dagger command line would scan automatically scan the API schema for that module, and from there generates command line flags for my convenience. Here it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to generate a Go client for me because I'm using Go. If I were using
the SDK as Go, correct? Yeah.
Exactly. If I were developing this in Python, it would generate the Python bindings, right?
Got it.
The idea is then I have this this little DAG object. Oh, I want autocomplete. Is autocomplete working? Come on.
What IDE are you using?
This is Zed. I've been trying a new IDE. It is awesome. I recommend trying it out. It's written in Rust. It's very, very fast.
Okay.
I'm very bad at configuring things in general. So let me try reopening
But you're really good at code completion by your own self.
Oh yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I would love to show how code completion actually works. Let me give it one try, and then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna quit Zed. But the killer feature of Zed is it has this cool collaborative mode built in. Sorry, I'm just let me get my credentials in there. Okay. Oh, this is the wrong. Okay, I promise it's gonna work. I believe.
As well.
Positive vibes. Arun, yeah, positive vibes. We can do this.
We should do like a the sacrifice as we used to do a Docker call. Put a Lego over there.
I keep forgetting that, and you're right. That is the key. Okay, I believe in this. Okay, it's working. Cool.
There you go. Voila.
So DAG dot, and then so DAG is my entry point into all available functions. And so when I install a module, all the functions from that module are now added. So now I can type dag dot Wolfie dot. I can see everything that's available. I can see dot container. It's right there, and it says, oh, you can pass options. So this is a very common Go pattern. If you have optional arguments, Go doesn't let you. It doesn't have a concept of optional arguments, but you just pass a structure with field. So here, it detected this, the -- packages. This is optional. I don't have to specify packages.
Okay.
In fact, let's start that way. Let's just call a container without the packages, and then let me make this look nicer. Container dot what did it do after? With mounted directory. With mounted directory, you can mount secret file.
Exactly the same set of commands available in Go.
Exactly. It's all generated from the same API schemas, so none of this stuff is manually done, which is beautiful because when we ship a new feature in the API, all the SDKs are just boom, updated.
And these community SDKs are also conforming to the same API schema?
Yes. Exactly. So when you contribute an SDK, you're really actually contributing a code generator.
Got it.
And once it's hooked up, it keeps feature parity. We just regenerate everything at each release.
Yeah, I got it.
And all of that, of course, runs in Dagger pipelines.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm mounting. You notice that here, if I want to mount a directory, I just receive that directory as an argument, and then I pass it to a function that requires the argument. But it's just really nice to this part here is just a game changer. Right. For me as a user, because usually moving artifacts around is where things fall apart in existing DSLs and scripts. It just becomes a pain. As long as you're just executing commands, then it's moving maybe strings around, URLs. Life is good. You don't need Dagger. If there's an artifact involved, things get really terrible really quickly. So this is just to say, oh, my artifact is just this variable, is just really nice. Okay, now I want to set the work dir to /src, right? Basically just doing what was here.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to do this here. I'm just going to return the container,
That's
you
it.
know, and there you
And so
go.
if
This
they
is
want to
basic.
spin up a terminal with the container, they can use it in the function that is consuming this function now.
Exactly. So this is a complete function that takes a directory as input and returns a container. So basically, this is sort of a build function, right? As code. So let's see if it works. Let me open a terminal. Okay. Okay. So first, I can call Dagger functions just as a sanity check. So it's running and compiling everything on the fly. Oh, no errors. Okay. Let me just to show you, because the dealing with errors is actually part of the fun. I'm in
Yeah.
the dev loop right now. Oh, you made a mistake. This is a regular Go mistake, shown by regular Go tools. I can go to the line and fix it
Mm.
and then
Yep.
rerun it.
Bingo.
So this is what we mean by no more push and pray, right? I'm just iterating on this
Yeah. Yeah.
primitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now I can say Dagger call. I'm not going to specify -m because I want it to be, the local directory. So I could
Yeah.
just say this, but just skip it. Dagger call my container --source. Just pass the current directory, and
And
then give me a terminal on that
Dagger.
container. And boom.
Voila.
And then
Yeah.
from there, we're iterating. I forgot, I had to fix me here. Install packages, so I'll say, all right, how do I do that again? I need the Wolfie container opts, and then I have
You
packages,
can put all the
and I
packages
pass,
that you
a
care
list of,
about.
whoops, if we can pull it off. Okay, so open SSH, rsync, git, save, run. Oh, oh, I forgot the dot. No, I forgot. Yeah, I'm chaining these function calls, right? And that's it. It's fixed.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you're given a
So
terminal, you can do run rsync inside that. That's pretty awesome. So
exactly. Yeah.
whatever we did in the CLI, we're able to do that very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
in the Go function as well. There's a question here actually, by Malhar. Is it useful for a guy who's looking for a DevOps internship?
I think if you're getting into DevOps, I'm going to generalize that question, but if you're, um, I think Dagger, I think what Dagger brings to the table is it lets you encapsulate discrete DevOps expertise into code, and it lets you quickly and easily consume someone else's DevOps expertise, right? From the command line or from code. I think that's been the missing piece in the DevOps community, I think, for a while. And it's incredibly useful, I think, for both experts and beginners. So if you're looking for a DevOps internship, I'm going to put you in the beginner bucket. I think it just lowers the barrier of entry enormously, because that means all those modules you can quickly, once you figured out the basics of Dagger, then you're basically you can just explore the Daggerverse, and you basically have superpowers. You can find that tool you were learning about, and then it's available as a Dagger function. You're going to start doing useful things really quickly. You're skipping the part where you spend 2 days just figuring out all the requirements and kind of building up the perfect environment. Also, I think it's a way to then start contributing in manageable pieces, right? You can pick a starter project, something you want to show off, something you want to blog about, and then you can have a tangible output, of your weekend project, which is a module. Um, like this Wolfie module that
Yeah.
we're using.
Yeah.
Um, let me show it to you actually, because this is obviously a demo module, but let me show you what a real module looks like.
Yeah, so basically what we're
Uh,
doing is, it works on my DevOps environment versus your DevOps environment.
yeah,
We're providing a consistent language across all the DevOps
yeah,
professionals and
yeah,
saying, let's all talk this language of the Dagger module and the function.
yeah,
And if we all talk that language, that makes it consistent across everybody.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, what I hear a lot from, DevOps people is that a lot of times your you your tooling, you invest a lot of time in your tooling at your job, and then you change jobs, and then the
Yeah.
tooling stays behind, and you got to start over because it's all tied to that stack, just not transposable, or it's just not allowed. It's not your IP. And it's just very, so you're kind of starting over, and there's a lot of waste. It's we're wasting brain cycles just reinventing things. And I mean, I talked to someone who was literally, he had a new job, and he was in several months into trying to convince his team to maybe re-implement parts of what he just had before that he loved using. And he was just so depressed, and he was, this was at a Dagger meetup, and he was determined to do it all in Dagger modules so that basically it would never happen to him again. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
so I don't know if answering the internship question, Dagger won't magically get you an internship or replace the need to learn a lot of tools. I mean, DevOps is
Right.
just a patchwork of tools, but I do think it helps kind of do it in a cohesive framework. Yeah.
Okay. So the question from Tony: was this method of tooling called daggering?
Daggerizing.
Daggerizing.
Daggerizing. Yes.
Daggerizing. Okay. Daggerizing. All right. Awesome. Yeah, we were looking at the real module, so let's take a look at that.
Oh yeah. So this is my Wolfie. This is the module we've been using. So this is the container function we called, and it's suspiciously short. And I'll show you actually why. Let me go back in the history. This is a fun example. If you go back in the oh yeah, use APKO. So this is where I got. Okay, let me just go back to the previous version. Go view file. Okay. Wrong file. Super Git. Oh, these are all my other modules. Yeah. That's the other thing. I when I have 30 minutes after putting the kids to bed, I I I just write a few Dagger functions because it's fun. I would never get to do that before. Okay, so here, this is before I simplify it, so it was a little longer. And you could see here I have a very naive implementation of this container of how to install packages, right? So first, let's see. So if you call container, first you apply the base. And here I call dag.container, which is the core. This is the core primitive. It's a core function of the Dagger API to just get an empty container, just an empty shell. And then I call from, which is exactly what you would think. It's from, like in the Docker file. And base is probably defined up here. Yeah, so from this, so you can see, just it pulls it from the registry. Fingar is the company that makes Wolfie. So this is just the base container. Then I'm going to skip this because this is like a toy feature that my buddy Darren asked for. I wanted to impress him, so we implemented it. So ignore that. And then 3, what we care about, install packages. And here I re-implement basically what a Docker file does, but in the for loop, right? I iterate over the list of packages, which is here, just a list of
That is
strings.
provided to us. Yeah.
Yeah, but the API was a little more complicated here. You can see, in the current version, it's the packages is just an argument to the function. But
Right.
here it was a little more complicated. I had first you had an object that you passed a configuration to, and then you would call a method called container. So you would
Right.
have to chain more anyway.
Yep.
So I iterate over the packages, and for each one, I just call with exec. So I add another execution of a command in the container, apk add that package, and then I just append it. So I'm just building up this pipeline, right? And then I return the result, and that works perfectly fine. But it's just not the most efficient way. Well, that's how 90% of Docker files work, right? Install this, install this, install this. But as anyone knows, if you've used Docker files, there's this very common problem where if you change the order, right, or if you change the version of a package, then you're going to invalidate the caching for everything below. Also, you're doing it in a sequence, right? So you can't parallelize installing all the packages and then merge it back together. But there's um, but it would be more efficient if you could. So then I realized, oh, ChainGuard released a special tool called APKO, which does exactly that for APK packages. So it's just a tool that you have to configure it with a YAML manifest, and if you get it, it's a good tool. The point is I didn't know exactly how to use it, but if you learn how to use it, you can specify the packages you want, and it will take care of fetching them in parallel and then giving you the final image, and it's faster. And so I kept thinking, oh, it would be cool if I learned that tool and added it to my module, but I never had the time, right? So that's a perfect example of discrete DevOps knowledge, right? Someone out there knows how to use that tool. I don't have the time to learn. Moving on. And then a little later, someone from the Dagger team, an engineer in the team called Alex, got together with Eric, who's one of the core maintainers. They're two maintainers of Dagger, and they did it. They learned how to use the tool. They spent a couple hours figuring out how to best Daggerize it, and then they Daggerized it. And so now, if you go to Daggerverse, if you look for APKO, there's a module for it. You can see it's oh, that's actually someone else's. Oh, I guess now there's two modules for it. It is spreading, and you can see, oh, okay, there's a function for building a Wolfie container, an Alpine container, okay, great. So I actually never looked at the code of this one. I don't even know what language it's written in, but I
Yeah,
installed it, and then you can see if you go back to the history, this is where I say, use APKO for faster builds.
possibilities,
And if
exactly.
you look at the build, the diff, you can see I added the package here. Sorry, I
Yeah,
added the module.
yeah,
There's a bunch of generated code, but then here I removed all this crap that I
beautiful,
had written before, and I say dag.apko.wolfie, and I pass the packages,
straightforward.
and that's it.
And
So that's
I think that's the
yeah.
joy of it. And I'm seeing a comment from Scott.
Mm-hmm.
He's exactly kind of mimicking that same sentiment. The capability of one module written in one language being able to call modules function written in any other language is a real
Yeah.
game changer. So I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're talking about. That you don't need to know what language is the other module written in.
Yeah. Exactly. And the fun fact about this one, that the overlay feature, the one I said to ignore, this was kind of silly, but so my friend Darren Shepard, from Acorn,
Yeah,
previously Rancher, he was playing with Wolfie, I think last year, and he tweeted at Dan, the founder of ChainGuard, asking, "Hey, is there any way that I just want to build an image by just smashing other images together? Is there any chance your tooling does that?"
yeah,
And they said, well, we don't support it yet, but we could do it in theory, blah, blah. And so then I just slapped this together to demonstrate to Darren that how cool this feature was. It wasn't finished yet.
Dagger can do it.
I put a lot of effort into convincing Darren to try Dagger.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, and turns out you can just, let me show you the code actually.
Well, I mean, really changing the world one developer at a time, and that's what it takes. I mean, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
That's what we
Oh,
do.
totally. Yeah, and I mean Darren's great. Like
Yeah,
Darren is famously grumpy, and so if Darren likes it, then that makes me feel good. I think okay, it's
that's
actually
it. Yeah,
useful.
exactly, exactly.
And the feature is basically, it just looks straightforward. You pass an optional argument called overlays. It's a list of containers, and then it iterates over them, and for each overlay, it takes the container and it adds the root file system of that overlay container at slash, at the root, and it just does that again and again. So this is basically merging all these containers together, and then it returns the result. And that was the feature,
Yeah,
one argument, 3 lines.
yeah,
So that felt really good.
yeah. It shows the simplicity and the beauty of it. My
Hmm.
God, Solomon, we have almost come to the end of the webinar here.
Okay.
Is there anything else that I should have asked that I didn't ask that you would like to talk about, or about Dagger? Well, one thing that I would like to ask is, where where do you need help in terms of developers
Ah,
community trying it out and contribute back
right.
to that?
So if any of this is remotely interesting to you, the number one call to action is to join our Discord, to join the community before you even try the product. I mean, of course, try it. I would love for you to try it. But I would say if you pick one thing to do, I would join our Discord. If you go to dagger.io, it's that little icon here. It's an online community, it's like Slack. And really, it's the core of Dagger because it's a group of people that are just passionate about this and just can tell this should be better, and we're doing it together. And honestly, it's beautiful. So I recommend joining it if this is your thing. Definitely, if you're a beginner and you want to get into DevOps, we'll love to help you take your first steps. It's a very friendly and welcoming community, which I'm very proud of. Erwin, that was very important to us in the early days of Docker, also.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
there is no question about it. And I've been involved with Docker for over a decade now. I can claim that, from the very early days.
you
And
can. Yeah,
something that you personally, was vouching for. How do we keep it very inclusive, very diverse, and very welcoming, and very kind, and very helpful? So I think, in that sense, um, if that's the call for action, I would definitely recommend developers community to give it a shot and try it out and
yeah,
see what we can do about it.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is this community. It's really our superpower because then they go and apply Dagger to their problems, and then they come back with gold, things they learned, and then they share with us and with everyone else. And so I learned a lot about how Dagger is used and can be used. And one thing we realized, especially with this modular system, the functions, is that you can use Dagger beyond CI, basically. CI is a great starting point because, again, it's a mess, it's painful. There's a lot of opportunities to simplify and improve, but it turns out in almost software projects have a lot of pipelines, a
Yeah,
lot of things that um, are better off modeled as DAGs,
yeah,
little nodes of work sending data to each other. It turns out Dagger is really good at that. And so a lot of times what happens is you start with CI and then you get into data pipelines because a lot of CI pipelines have to move data around, and
right.
that's usually very painful to do. So data pipelines, from there we realized, oh wow, AI pipelines are actually a good
Yeah,
application.
yeah,
So you have an LLM and you want to set up all the surrounding stack. You want to test the result of the LLM, or simply integrate an LLM into an existing app that works nicely. And one that I'm very excited about, that actually we're working on with Darren, that I mentioned before, is AI functions. So it turns out LLMs have this feature called function calls that allow them to interact with the outside world. Um, and there is a gap in the AI ecosystem where you need to have functions to call, and ideally an ecosystem of lots of functions that can be easily be consumed by the model and composed by the model.
got
And
it.
so basically, we discovered Dagger functions are perfect for that. So we started experimenting with basically exposing Dagger modules and all their containing functions to a
Yeah,
model, and then
got it.
prompting the model to do something, and then it figures out on its own which Dagger functions to call and to chain. So basically, we have AIs composing pipelines dynamically on the fly to achieve their goal.
Yeah,
And this is not code generation, right? It's different. It's an agent model, and it turns out Dagger is a perfect use for it. And honestly, I would have never guessed that. It was not the plan. We just sort of discovered it.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
when I was at Sun, and Bill Joy there used to say always, innovation happens elsewhere. So you create something you don't
yeah,
know, you think this is this one use case, and people like, and that's the beauty of open source community. As people start looking at it, say, ah, ta-da, they have a light bulb moment, and then they start applying it, and they bring the feature back to the community. That's why open source stands on the shoulder of giants. I
yeah.
want to end the webinar on a very positive note here. Scott, again, is making a comment. the Dagger community and the team have to be one of the best I have come across. I'm really happy and excited about that part of it for sure.
You mean Scott Johnston?
Scott Molinari, apparently.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure SJ thinks like that as well too.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
community. I
I
love
bumped into
community.
SJ last week at KubeCon Paris, and he was talking about. I had dinner with him, and March 20th we were talking about. To date, that was 11 years ago at PyCon. You released Docker, so
That's true.
that was exactly March 20th PyCon. So I think I know he thinks of you very highly of you in very high regards, and it will be time to maybe show Dagger to him as well.
I will show Dagger to anyone at any time. Usually I won't shut up about it. So that getting me to show it to whoever you want will not be a problem.
Excellent. Thank you, Solomon. And I'm sure we will keep talking as the product evolves, as the community evolves. In a
Sure.
year or two, I'm not sure where it's going to be. It's going to explode, hopefully. So, wishing you a lot of good luck for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care. Bye, bye, folks, and have a wonderful weekend.